Okay, so we all think we know the story of Jonah, right? Guy runs from God, gets on a boat, there's a big storm, he gets swallowed by a giant fish. It's a Sunday school classic. But what if I told you that the giant fish is kind of the least important part of the story? What if the real jaw-dropping twist happens after Jonah is back on dry land? A twist that reveals something, well, something deeply uncomfortable about human nature, and maybe even about you and me.
This quote from Pastor Charlie Grimes, it absolutely nails the uncomfortable truth we're going to be talking about. This is the central conflict we're going to unpack. So, okay, let's dive in. Let's start at the very beginning, with the command that kicked this whole thing off.
All right, first up, let's meet our guy, Jonah. He's a Hebrew prophet. That means his whole job, his entire career, is to listen to God and then deliver God's message. Pretty straightforward. And one day, he gets a direct command. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it. Sounds like a pretty standard gig for a prophet, right? But here's the thing. For Jonah, this wasn't just any assignment. This was, for him, a hateful, completely impossible mission.
See, to really get why Jonah freaks out, you have to get what Nineveh was. This wasn't just some random, wicked city. It was the capital of the Assyrian Empire. They were the sworn enemies of Israel, infamous for their brutality, their cruelty, and to make it even worse, they had recently wiped 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel, Jonah's people, completely off the map. So this isn't some abstract mission. This is deeply personal. And if you're still not getting the sheer horror of this, the source material gives us incredible analogy. Sending Jonah to Nineveh was like sending a Jewish person into the heart of Nazi Germany in 1940 to preach to the top brass. God wasn't just asking him to go talk to some bad people. He was telling him to walk into the capital of the evil empire that had slaughtered his family and friends. So you can imagine what's going through Jonah's head right about now. So God gives this impossible command, and what does Jonah do? He does what our source material calls what any sane person would probably do. He runs. And look, he doesn't just drag his feet or procrastinate. Nope. Jonah gets up and literally runs in the exact opposite direction. And this is where it gets kind of wild. Just look at the scale of his disobedience. God says go about 550 miles east to Nineveh, the heart of the enemy. But Jonah, he books it 2,500 miles west to Tarsish. Now, Tarsish was basically the ancient world's version of a beach resort. So he's not just running away from his scary mission, he's running toward comfort and luxury. Big difference.
Well, as the story goes, you can run from God, but you can't really hide. A massive storm kicks up, so violent the ship is about to be torn to pieces. Jonah finally fesses up that he's the problem. He tells the sailors, "Look, just throw me overboard and the storm will stop." They do, and just as he's about to drown, God sends a huge fish to swallow him whole. Not exactly the rescue he was expecting.
So after 3 days marinating in fish guts, which is, a pretty good time out to rethink your life choices, Jonah finally prays, and the fish spits him right out onto dry land. God gives him a second chance, the call comes again, and guess what? The mission hasn't changed, not one bit. It's still go to Nineveh.
So this time, Jonah actually goes. He trudges into this massive city, the capital of his sworn enemies. And you think after all that drama, he'd have some incredible, heart-wrenching sermon prepared, right? Well, here's his entire speech. 8 words. 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. That's it. He basically phones it in with the least amount of effort possible.
And what happens next is just unbelievable. The greatest revival in history breaks out instantly. The people of Nineveh actually believe him. The king himself gets off his throne, trades his robes for sackcloth, and orders a citywide fast. We're talking about 120,000 people, the entire city, repenting on the spot. This is a massive win. This should be the happy ending, right? Mission accomplished.
But this is where the story takes a hard left turn that nobody sees coming. When God sees their genuine repentance and decides not to destroy the city, Jonah doesn't celebrate, he's not relieved, he's absolutely furious.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. His mission was the most successful prophetic mission maybe ever, and he's having a complete meltdown about it. He went there to see fire and brimstone, to watch his enemies get what he thought they deserved. Instead, he saw mercy. And as our source puts it, he was offended by God's amazing grace. And it's here that we finally get the real reason Jonah ran in the first place. He basically yells at God, "See, I knew it. This is exactly what I said would happen. This is why I ran away." It wasn't that he was afraid of failing. He wasn't afraid they'd kill him. No, he was afraid that God would actually succeed. He was terrified that God would be God, gracious, compassionate, and willing to forgive his enemies.
Our source calls this the desire to add a footnote to grace. And it's so human, isn't it? We want amazing grace for ourselves, for our mess-ups. But for them, for our enemies, the people who have really, truly hurt us, yeah, we kind of want to add a little asterisk, a little footnote saying, grace for me, but maybe justice for them. Jonah is the poster child for this very feeling.
But the story isn't quite over. Jonah's still fuming. So he goes and sits on a hill overlooking the city, basically just pouting, maybe even hoping they'll screw up so God will zap them after all. And it's right here that God teaches him one last powerful object lesson.
So Jonah's sitting there, stewing in the desert heat, and God makes a leafy plant grow up overnight to give him some shade. And we get this one little line in the text. For the first time in this whole book, it says Jonah was happy. Not about saving 120,000 souls, mind you. No, he was happy about a plant that made him a little more comfortable.
But the next day, God sends a worm. The worm eats the plant, it withers and dies. The sun beats down, a hot wind picks up, and Jonah's reaction is completely off the charts. He gets so angry about this dead plant that he wants to die, again, all because his personal air conditioning just broke.
And this is what it all boils down to, isn't it? The contrast is just staggering. On one hand, you've got Jonah, who is totally consumed with a temporary plant he did nothing to earn, all because it affected his personal comfort. And on the other hand, you have God, who is concerned about a massive city filled with 120,000 people and their eternal destiny. Their priorities could not be more different.
Now, in a normal story, this is where Jonah would have a big aha moment and learn his lesson. But that's not what happens. The book of Jonah just stops. It ends abruptly, without a neat little bow. It leaves us with a question mark.
First, God hits him with this question. It's so simple, but so deep. Is it right for you to be angry about the plant? He's basically asking, Jonah, really? After everything that's happened, is this plant? Is this really what you're this worked up about? He's forcing Jonah to look at his own heart.
And then God just lays out the logic for him, plain and simple. You're all bent out of shape over this plant that you didn't even plan to take care of. It was here one day and gone the next. He's pointing out that Jonah's grief is for something totally fleeting, something that cost him nothing. And then we get the final line of the entire book, a question that just hangs there. God contrasts Jonah's petty concern for his own comfort with his own massive, world-changing concern for people. The story doesn't answer. It just ends, turning that question right back at Jonah. And, well, right back at us. It forces us to ask, whose grace offends us? And what do we care about more, our own temporary comfort or the fate of people we've decided are our enemies? It's a question that is just as sharp and uncomfortable today as it was thousands of years ago.